Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org.
Hi, this is Jeff Ferris for Author Magazine. I'm here in the lovely University Bookstore in Seattle, Washington, talking with Kathleen Sharp, the author of the new book, Blood Medicine. Kathleen, thank you for sitting with me today.
It's great to see you, Jeff.
So how did this book land in your lap? And was it originally going to be an article for Vanity Fair, from what I understand?
Yes, it was. It landed in my lap through an attorney who called me, and Mark Duxbury, the main character, kept calling. I didn't want to do this story. It was too complicated, pharma, I didn't want to tangle with the companies. But Mark was a very good salesman, a drug rep, and he kept calling and calling until I finally got it in 2007, when what happened is that the FDA started to hold hearings on this drug, Procrit, and it was starting to kill an amazing amount of people, at the same time that Congress was starting to hold hearings on how Amgen and Johnson & Johnson were playing fast and loose with selling the drug off-label or unapproved. And that's when I got it. I realized, wow, here's a way to tell this national scandal through the eyes of two star salesmen. So that's what I did.
Well, and it was originally going to be an article, but then how did it become a book?
Well, it originally, Vanity Fair immediately, assigned it to me. And I realized that, I kept calling Johnson & Johnson asking for their sort of feedback or their position on this drug. And they wouldn't respond. They sort of stonewalled me. And after about a year and a half of this, I realized this is what a whistleblower goes through. And this was after post-crash America, and how the average person was really trying hard to do the right thing, but kind of slipping away. And I realized that it's a great opportunity to tell a nonfiction novel. And then that's what it turned out to be, from the point of view of the whistleblower who was trying to do well by doing good.
Let's talk about nonfiction novel. Could you define that for me and how you approached writing this book?
Well, it was a tough book to write, and what I did as a journalist is that I sort of laid the groundwork by getting all of the documents together and sort of having a timeline, and including Johnson & Johnson's work, Amgen's work, and also my two characters, and sort of making sure that all the facts were there for this foundation. And then I began to layer on top of that the story, the heart of the story, which is these two men on a, they're good buddies on a road trip gone bad, essentially. And so you layer it with the scenery. I would describe their dialogue. I would get it from either court documents or from the characters themselves. I'd go back to a hotel and look at it and try and describe the scene and the setting as it was 10 years ago. And it became, I really wanted it to be like a John Grisham book that seemed very fictional, but was actually based in fact. In fact, I'm quite proud of the endnotes because people are amazed and they can't believe that all of this happened. But when they go to the back, they'll see that it's very well sourced.
Well, and it does read like a John Grisham novel, exactly.
Oh, thank you.
Talk to me, though, about how you created two characters with their real people. How did you go about with the trustworthiness issue, the fact that they were afraid, to maybe speak the truth to you, or how did you sort of break that barrier?
Well, I was very lucky because these characters were very open. It's not often that, a writer will find characters who will open their hearts and their homes to you, and that's what these men did. I think it helped that Jan Schlickman, one of the great, attorneys, quite a character himself, had already been through this with one book. And he knew
civil action.
A civil action, right. And he knew what it was like for a journalist to spend years of her or his life, in the belly of the whale. So he was very, very generous. But what I also did is I asked them to sign an agreement with me. And I wasn't going to invest years of my life and time unless I knew I had the exclusive rights to their story. And in return, I would do my best to tell the story accurately and sympathetically, which is, I think, what I did. But I didn't just count on them. I counted on other documents, I counted on FDA reports, medical reports, other interviews with other people. And because of that, you see that these characters are flawed heroes. You know, they're real living people who, like all of us, have demons inside of them. And so the warts came out and all.
Do you see this as a tragedy, or I guess, or whatever a book that with a happy ending is?
Well, I think it's very inspiring because these Davids were up against huge Goliaths, and they are indefatigable. You know, it really gave me hope and inspiration to see what ordinary people would do and the extraordinary lengths they would go to try and help all of us by blowing the whistle on a very deadly drug, and also by trying to get back some of our taxpayer money from the crimes of off-label promotion that two companies were involved in.
How did you take such complex business and science and break it down into something that was understandable for the common reader?
You know, I always have in mind the common reader because that's who's around me. My brother's a longshoreman. My sister's a waitress. I know the type of books that they love to read, and I want my books to be read by them. So, you know, I can understand these very complicated things and boil them down to very simple issues. And I think that there's, you know, you can just do that in a sense or two and then move on back to the story, you know, and to the travails of our heroes.
And you did an amazing job with that, because a lot of that stuff was extremely complex, and I can understand that, so thank you for doing that. Were you afraid of yourself of tackling Big Pharma in such a, you know, prominent national thing?
Well, I was, and the reason is because, you know, these are tough stories, and sometimes there's not the payoff of a real heartfelt story, but I found that in these two guys. And after a while, when I saw what whistleblowers go through and what Mark and Dean had been through and Jan Schlickman, the fear sort of left me, and I just realized I have to tell this story. People have to know, you know, the journey that these men are on, because it really is uplifting, and they're not out there for the glory or the money. And in fact, you know, I don't want to have a spoiler here, but, you know, one of the characters kind of leaves us in a really abrupt way.
Talk to me a bit about freelance writing, because some people like to freelance write, but it might not necessarily be able to make a career out of it, and obviously you have. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, it's a challenge to make a career out of it, but once you do, it's very, very gratifying. You know, I have kids at home. I live on the West Coast, which I think is a place of great stories, you know, including blood medicine. And it is, you know, it behooves you to be very creative and also to have an eye towards turning magazine pieces into books, into films. And that's what I've tried to do, you know, over the years is, you know, maybe I'll be assigned a newspaper piece by the New York Times, and then that becomes another project. But, you know, we kind of learn how to multitask, as you know. And I'm finding more and more that books are extremely satisfying, because it's hard to, you know, fit a great story into even 10,000 words, let alone 800 words.
Well, how do you go from pitching articles to the big names to having them pitch to you?
Well, you just do good work. You know, you do good work, you do it on time, you find unusual stories, and you get into the characters. I really find that the people are ways for us to tell the great nonfiction tales of today. To me, it's like this is a renaissance for nonfiction right now happening, because there's so many great stories, whether it's in finance or pharma or the environment, and there's not a lot of people who are out there doing it, because, you know, we see the shrinkage in space of magazines and newspapers. But in books, that's where you can really run with it. And I think in film too, you know, HBO, there's all kinds of cable news outlets that are hungry for great stories. So,
if writing has taught you anything, it has taught you what?
it's taught me to pay attention and to be very aware of all the wonderful things going on around us in this world.